We have a wonderful theme here today, which is the Black Supplementary Schools and the role of the church. And one of the things I want to do, first of all, before I go into my introduction about the organisation I'm representing today, is just lay a foundation on the role of the black churches within the UK. I'm going to be reading from an extract from my good friend, I can't even remember his name, Dr. David Muir, and he's done a wonderful piece about the black churches, which I'm going to read some extracts from that, if that's okay. And I think it's going to inform richly our discourse as we go through the conversation today. A history of struggle, growth and maturity. For the black church movement in the UK, there is a rich heritage of political engagement and civic participation. Undoubtedly, this is largely due to the fact that historically the church was the only institution that black people could independently manage and control their own lives and communities. The church, therefore, became the dominant institution in forming and regulating social, cultural, spiritual, and political life of the black community. Speaking of the black church experience, Eric Lincoln, the scholar of black religion, expresses this idea succinctly. He says, "The black man's pilgrimage in America was made less onerous because of his religion. His religion was the organizing principle around which his life was structured. His church was his school, his forum, his political arena, his social club, his art gallery, his conservatory of music. It was lyceum and gymnasium, as well as sanctum sanctorum. His religion was his fellowship with man, his audience with God. It was the peculiar sustaining force which gave him the strength to endure when endurance gave no promise, and the courage to be creative in the face of his own dehumanization. This is the black religious experience." The arrival of Empire Windrush in Tilbury on the 22nd of June 1948 marked the beginning of a new wave of Caribbean immigrants to the UK. It also marked the beginning of the formation and development of the black majority churches. Today, the presence and ministry of the black majority churches is an accepted part of Christian life and worship in Britain. Indeed, there is now in the Church of England an envoy, a special envoy. But this normative acceptance of the black majority churches was not always the case. On the same day that the Empire Windrush docked in Tilbury, 11 Labour MPs, led by J. Murray, wrote a letter complaining to the Prime Minister about the discord and unhappiness this wave of Caribbean immigrants would cause to the nation. Doubtless, we have come a long way since then in our attitudes, politics, and practices as both church and society work to engender a more inclusive, tolerant, and just society. In reflecting upon the post-Windrush history of the African and Caribbean community and the growth and development of the black majority churches and the wider black Christian leadership in Britain, there is a perspective that should be avoided. The tendency to separate the history of the black church movement in Britain from the struggles of the black community in the early 1950s and 1960s. These phenomena are very clearly entwined. During this time, the black churches have gone through various phases of development that have been characterized historically and sociologically from early mission between the 1940s and the 50s to a period of consolidation in the 60s through to 1975, and from the diverse church since 1980 to 1993 to the maturing church in 2004 onwards. Today, most significant among the black majority churches is the growth of the Pentecostal churches. There are over 335,000 members attending these churches in the UK, with around 2,850 churches and some 4,800 ministers. The institutional strength of these churches present real opportunities for social action and political engagement, especially in urban areas. Growing in influence. 6 decades after Windrush, although we're only talking about 3 decades, 6 decades after Windrush, the growing political influence of these churches is acknowledged as a hugely positive social contribution in the UK, and meetings with senior black church leaders have become a regular item in the diary of the Prime Minister and senior government officials. A defining moment in the recognition of the political potential of the black majority churches was reached in March 2006 as some 29 senior church and community leaders gathered at 10 Downing Street. This historic meeting was followed by the attendance of the Prime Minister at a conference at a leading black majority church, Ruach Ministries in Brixton. The following month, in his keynote address, Prime Minister Blair paid tribute to the black majority churches and their achievements. And he said, "People talk a great deal about the decline of religion and churches in our national life. Many people are unaware that almost 500,000 people from Britain's African and Caribbean communities walk through the doors of British churches every week. I can see from this audience how the church thrives. Churches such as yours, Pastor John Francis, have long been the bedrock of our local communities. This can be seen in your work in schools, your contribution to welfare, your support for the vulnerable and the most needy. You promote important values: respect, tolerance, family, trying to bring up children properly, caring for the less well-off, and ensuring that we all make the most of the talents we've got. Your organizations, the churches, have a crucial campaigning role. They are not political in the sense that the parties, as the parties are, but they do engage in the important issue of their day. They cannot but do so. They are political, but with a small p." And in conclusion, a statement from Barack Obama in relation to the future. "As an institution, the black majority churches are here to stay. With a strong identity in Christ, black majority churches are taking their faith into local and national politics in the UK. Historically, black churches have been what Eric Lincoln refers to as peculiar sustaining force and organizing principle around which lives were structured. It is not surprising, therefore, to hear President Barack Obama speaking of the black church as the place where he discovered a vessel for my beliefs and a community where they fortified my racial identity and confirmed my belief in the capacity of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. A place where the biblical call to challenge principalities and powers is a key part of the religious tradition. It is a testimony to their maturity and newfound confidence that more and more second and third generation members of the black majority churches and their wider Christian community are actively engaging in the social and political spheres to transform their communities. Who knows where the journey of engagement will lead?" Thank you. This very much, I hope, lays a foundation of the perspective of where we're coming as a majority black-led church. And even the term, the black-led church, is something that is not necessarily grounded in many theologians or pastors' vocabulary. It just happens to be a church that maybe have a black pastor or is predominantly got a congregation of black people. I'd hate for anybody to leave here and think that there is a church for black people, a church for white people. No, there is just the church. It just so happens that some churches have a majority audience who happen to be black. Okay, well, at this time, we've got another contribution from somebody who has not been able to be here, but I'm going to ask Kayenda to come and to read the contribution from Reverend Maddox. He is a very successful supplementary school practitioner here in London. He can't be here, but he's left a contribution to help us form our conversation.
Okay, so he said, the church has an enormous asset in terms of premises and minibuses, responsibilities calling for the organisation of education for the young and all people. In fact, the church started many of the formal schools that we see today. However, this is not the primary function of the church, as it is there to represent and call all people to Jesus Christ. There are a number of things that prevent churches from opening their doors to black supplementary schools. These are: all men are equal before God. Therefore, some churches will find it difficult for user groups such as black supplementary schools to cater for just one group of people. Churches should not be used for secular activities according to the scriptures. The church building should not be used for food catering and eating. Therefore, this will cause problems, as learners need to be refreshed during class sessions, lunchtime for example. A number of the groups that want to use the church premises are not believers, and therefore the church will not hire their premises to them. I have been pastoring for 15 years. This is Michael Maddox, and the school is celebrating 17 years of opening this year. And I have had to use separate buildings from the church on a number of occasions. Regardless of the above things that prevent the church from supporting and having a relationship with the black supplementary schools, they have started their own schools where the children are predominantly African origin from their own congregation. The church has been able to use their church hall facilities that are separate from the church sanctuary and therefore not offend the church members. The church runs supplementary schools and is very successful and is well attended. Where the church is not using their church halls, they are hiring these out to community groups such as the independent black supplementary schools. This is no conflict between the church and the independent black supplementary schools. I believe they work together to enable children of African origin to have a good start in their education. Gone are the days where many of the pastors had colonial minds. What the church supplementary schools do is have a strong discipline and ethics policy, supported by the parents of the children attending, and they share the same faith. This makes it easier for the children to learn. Most of the times, it is the same teachers or volunteers that take them for Sunday school lessons, where they already have respect for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Could you have that sheet again, just so we can use it for our reference? Thank you. At this time, I'm just going to go through a presentation about my particular organisation and my involvement in supplementary education. Thank you. The history of You Can Excel is that originally we started a project called National Black Boys Can Association. As a result of the growth of that project, we were consistently asked to be engaged with more than black boys. And so you're going to see as we develop here through this presentation that it was a progression from working just with black boys. The question was always asked, what about the black girls? And then it moved from not only the black girls, but what about the underachieving group, the most underachieving group, which was white working class boys. And so, in the very beginning, for 4 or so years, 5 years, we concentrated purely just working with black boys. And then what happened, we started to then work with some of the girls and the boys. And it's interesting, all of our organizational development has come as a response of the boys, not political pressure, not even pressure from parents. It was the pressure from the boys themselves. And I'd like to express that throughout all of our development. it's always been the ideas of the young people that we're working with that you're going to see some of the developments. Thank you. Thank you. No, you don't have to. The thank you is for the slides, and we just go for it. And again, brilliant. It's funny because my father's a preacher, and he says that when we were in church growing up, he would say, especially to the young man here, he said, anything I ask you to do it quickly. So you have to stay away from me now and be on point. Okay. Our values, we are committed to unleashing the unlimited potential of disadvantaged young people, especially boys. And we operate on sound ethical and biblical principles. When we were originally starting our program, what happened was that some people said, well, do you think being a church organization will actually be helpful in recruiting students? Okay? And we says, well, we knew the types of students that we needed to help. And it was important, because of our own values, we knew that we were not going to be prejudicial against those of non-faith or other faiths. But it was important for them to know the context and the environment they were going to be coming into. Although there was no area or idea of proselytizing the students, the young people, it was very important for us, for them to know the environment they were coming into. Our inspiration, thank you, is from many of these men here. The church in the UK has got a fantastic history of preachers, pastors, leaders who have not only been around the pulpit, but have also been on the high street, have been involved in social action. And when you start to look at some of these pastors, they've all got reverends or bishops in front of their names. When you begin to look at Reverend Nims, who is the founder of the Peace Alliance, a very proactive organization working with young people involved in crime and especially gun and knife violence. Reverend Isaacs, with street pastors, that's just taken the UK and the world by storm. This is where he's taking on voluntary people who are going out into the streets as street pastors, a concept that he got from Jamaica when he went to downtown Kingston. He just upscaled it. We see the likes of Bishop Wilton Powell. He was the founder of Nehemiah Housing Association, the biggest housing association in Birmingham. These are church initiatives that sometimes people outside of the church don't actually appreciate that we are involved with. And we could carry on and talk about all of those. But what I'm trying to exemplify here is that the church has a rich history of social action and also standing up for the disaffected. Okay? Thank you. Now, as an organization, we were very keen, and again, please, we were very keen to recruit some volunteers onto our program. And so a reporter came and says, we've heard about your little advert in the paper, and you've been asking for volunteer teachers to help train and support black boys. Times Education and Supplement came to the program and said, we want to know more about it. We didn't know who they were at the time. This is when the project started in 1999. They came, and we just thought there'd be a little matchbox editorial. But what actually happened was, they actually presented a front page article. As a result of this, we suddenly had inquiries from schools, universities from America, all around the UK, parents, saying, how can you help us? And so we realized that there was a problem, because the people who originally set up the program actually attended a church in Birmingham, and they heard about the statistics, and they said, we want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So what we're going to do is put a little summer program together. At the end of the summer program, the boys who didn't want to be there in the beginning didn't want to leave by the end. And they were the ones who said, we challenge you to continue this. And it's with that challenge that National Black Boys Can Association was established. And that wasn't a great idea from some of the people you saw in the video previously. So, as a result of this, and all the calls that were coming into different people's mobile phones, the idea was, we'll set up a franchise model. We'll use all the best practice and all the policies and procedures, take away all the barriers that we found when we were starting supplementary school. We'll take away all of that by putting together a toolkit. And because most of the people were professionals and business people, they put it together as a franchise model. So what we now have is a beautiful array of resources, policies, procedures, training, and a network of professional people all around the country who support initially black boys, but now I've got a whole wider circulation. One of the challenges we had with the churches was, we are not a black church. And if we put, especially in Dagenham for example, if we put a sign that Black Boys Camp Project is here, it wouldn't go down in our local community. Can we call it something else? We say you can call it what you like, as long as you're working with the young people. And so with that, we realized that many of the churches were going to have out-facing problems engaging with a wider group of people. And also the churches didn't, in their congregation, they wanted to appeal to the person in the flat or across the road. It might not happen to be African and Caribbean. So as a church that is inclusive, why stipulate just for black boys? And so with that, we began to look at opportunities to expand our appeal and our marketing to reflect that it is inclusive. Thank you very much. You might be asking, okay, what's different about your program compared to other initiatives? You know, we've heard today there's excellent projects even in the room today. Well, we'd like to think that our program, first of all, we've got the franchise model. So you haven't got just the support of a couple of people on the management committee. You've got a support of the whole network, and that's intellectually, financially, resourcefully as well. But our strategy is to work with the directly at the young people, with the young people. We work with the young person's parents. We work with the young person's educator, and we work to engage the community to support that individual. So we'd like to think it's a holistic, intentional program that we are providing. And all of our resources in our package actually supports that. Now, thank you. When we look at this slide, it's probably my favorite slide of all time, because this is when we started, okay? This is the demographic of education achievement when we started in Birmingham. And what is sad about this is still the national demographic around ethnicity and achievement. There are exceptions, like you've got Lambeth. Lambeth is doing excellently in regards to